Hello, I'm Steve Maskery and welcome to Workshop Essentials. I'm going to start the assembly of these two chairs as two sub-assemblies, and the first one is going to be this. It's the two front legs and the centre cross piece like that. And this is done with a couple of screws into the end grain. Now, screwing into the end grain is not the strongest of joints actually, but there's nothing to push these sides apart. There's no stresses in that direction. So it will actually be plenty strong enough. I've already counterbored and drilled a clearance hole in the legs. So the next thing to do is to do a 3mm pilot hole which will go into the rail. And I'm using these. These are stainless steel screws, 40mm long, 4mm in diameter, and I ordered round heads. And when they came, they were actually self-tap. They were round head, but they were self-tappers, a very fine thread, not what I wanted at all. And they were only 1/8 of an inch in diameter. So I rang them up, I got them swapped, and I've just been to collect them today. And when I've opened the box, they're not round head, they're countersink, and I can't be bothered to go and change them again. For this, it won't matter, but I will have to be careful that I don't drive them in too far. You need to know when to stop with countersink in softwood, because you can simply keep going forever and it will just chew up the workpiece, which I don't want. So we have a little bit of lubrication, a bit of wax, and that goes in there. Oh no, it doesn't go in there because I've got to drill the clearance hole first. The pilot hole. Clearance hole's already done, pilot hole. So that goes. I've got the right drill. Yes, it is. That's not. It doesn't seem very fast. That's right. So that goes in there. And you can see that I don't need to worry too much about this dropping because I've blocked it all up. I've got it nicely supported. It just makes the job a lot easier. And then I can move my clamp and get at the other two. That's better. Nice and flush, nice and strong. And that will be the front of my chair. Right, well, I've finally sussed out how I can get this clamped together. I'm having this at the front of my bench, and then this can go over like that. And this is the end which sits on the ground, and this end is behind my knee. So the back edge of my lower cross piece has got to line up with the end of the curve. That leaves me a little bit of land here at the front. So I've got a D4 adhesive. So that's suitable for outdoors, like that. And you have to put it on both, unfortunately. So it doesn't go quite as far as you would expect it to go. And that goes on there like that. Now the ends of these are accurately square, so I can use them to line up flush with the outer face of my back legs. I'm going to clamp that in place so it doesn't slip. And just to check, I can put this, and obviously this is at an angle, so I can have it up and down like this, which really screws the whole thing up. But if I have it on there and just check this bottom edge of my rail, I can see that's not quite right, and I can feel that it's not quite right, and it's a tiny, tiny amount. But because of the geometry of it, a very small amount of movement here makes a big movement at that end. That's great, that's perfect. So I've got my glue and I just need my screws. Make sure you get this the right way up. The bevel's got to go that way. That would really spoil your day, wouldn't it? It really would. Let's give it just a little bit more torque than that, I think. Nice. There we go. Right, now I can turn it around and do the other end. That's better. Let's check that one for square. That'll do nicely. And we can check actually by the with one of the other slats that should fit perfectly at this end, and it does. It does. That's nice and flush. So that's confirmation that I've got that right. Have I done this right? Yes. Ooh, I thought for a minute I'd got that. I thought for a minute that I'd got that bevel the wrong way. Keep going, you fool. Ba-bum, ba-bum. Right, so that's one down. Got the other one to do, and then I can put the two together. It's time to fix the front subassembly to the rear subassembly. And to do that, I'm going to use glue and screws. Now, Norm uses coach bolts, and I do have some coach bolts. Stainless steel, these are the ones with the domed head and the square underneath to stop it rotating. And of course, these are very, very strong. But my goodness me, they're not pretty, are they? They're really not. For a piece of furniture, I know it's only a garden furniture, but no. The ones I made before are as sound today as the day I built them 20 years ago. And they're just glued and screwed. So I'm going to do the same again. If these last 20 years, I suspect somebody else will be sitting in them, not me. So I'm going to glue them. I've got a D4 adhesive, of course, and I've got stainless steel screws. Now, my stainless steel screws are 40 millimeters long, and my wood is just over 20 millimeters thick. So although if this is flush with the front, it doesn't go right through, it's very, very close to going right through. And if I happen to screw a little bit too far, a little bit too zealous, it wouldn't take much before that point pokes out through the surface of my wood. So I'm going to shorten some of these screws. They start off at 40 and they're going to end up at about 38 or so like that. And to do that, I'm using a high-speed grinder. I've had this a long time. It's absolutely excellent. It survived the great haul of the big theft of all my stuff when it was in storage. And it's a really nice piece of kit. It's also doesn't meet modern safety regs because it doesn't stop within 10 seconds. The bearings are so good, this runs on forever when it's switched off. So my guess is the new ones have a brake on them. So to keep my fingers away from anything nasty, I've got a piece of wood with a clearance hole in it, like that, and a drill. And I've set this into reverse because when I grind this, I want to rotate it, and I want to rotate against the revolution of the grinding wheel. So, switch on, let it get up to speed, and just carefully touch it against the wheel. And that's all it is. And so now, it started off that long, and it's that long. Perfect. That gives me a suitable margin of error. And I need 2 12. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Got a few more to do. To fix my two sub-assemblies together, I'm going to start with the front section, and I'm going to clamp that to my bench about there so that it doesn't move and so that it'll stay upright while I'm getting the two of them together. And I'll just check that that is upright. It couldn't be more uprighter than that. And my rear section is going to go on like that. So I've marked out where I need to attach the glue. And there's a bit on there already, because this isn't my first take. And we've got some glue on there, and some glue on there. This glue does require it to go on both surfaces, not just one. There we go. And somewhere I've got a glue spreader, which I just can't see at the moment, so I'll grab another one. Make sure the glue's spread evenly. There we go. And that goes in like that. So I've got my clamps already set up. There we go. Bit of glue squeeze out. Now, this bench is fairly level, and that doesn't rock. So I'm expecting that. It's flush there and there. Not there, it's not. It was. It's moved. Flush there and there. No wobble. Perfect. When it's glued together, it will look like that. So now I'm going to drill for my short screws so that I know I'm going to get a good, strong joints, but I'm not going to come out the far side. So the easiest way to do that, I think, is to have it on its side like that. That'll do nicely. And I want them about there and there. So I've got a clearance drill and a pilot drill. Some candle wax to make it go in easily. Have I gone through? I believe not. Very good. And I think that's going to take anybody's weight, even mine. I'm now ready to attach my brackets. And these are screwed centrally in the width of the front leg. And I've got two counterboard holes at 30 millimeters down and 150 millimeters down. I've actually made these a little bit longer downwards than Norm's original design. I think it looks better. So I've got this clamped into place. It's nice and flush at the top. I know that it's vertical because I've checked with the distance there and the distance there, and that's both the same. And it's clamped in place. So I've got two screws. I've got a 40 millimeter screw as before and another short one, because although this would not come out the end, when it's counterboard, there's a very serious risk of it doing so. So I've made another short one as before, and they have got a bit of wax on them to make them go in easily. So the first thing then is to drill my counterboard hole. And I put a flag in to stop me going too deeply. Of course, if I'd thought about this earlier, I could have done them on the drill press before I assembled, and then I wouldn't have this trouble. But I didn't. So Ow, that's hot. Is that right? Yeah. And then I've got a 4mm clearance hole and a 3mm pilot hole. And then I've got to change drills because I haven't got enough drills. I've only got 3. I need 4. You always need one more than you've got. That's the rule. Oh no! And you can't pick it up with the magnetic ends because it's stainless. There we go. So that's that very nicely secured in the right place. There's a bit more work to do on the tops of these legs yet. And again, it would have been easier to do this on the drill press beforehand had I thought ahead. The original instructions call for the arm to be screwed down onto the top ends of the leg and the bracket. And the problem with that is that we're screwing into end grain. And I was always taught that screwing into end grain wasn't very strong. And it's certainly nowhere near as strong as screwing into face grain. Now, I've already done some end grain screwing here. But the difference is that there's no sideways force pushing these two legs apart because all the weight is downwards. Plus, there are lots of tie bars in the shape of the leg slats, the seat slats, that are going to hold the two sides together. So this really isn't under any stress. It's a different matter for the arms. This chair is going to get picked up, and it will get picked up by the arms, which means all the weight is going to be held by those screws. Now, yes, there's 3 of them, but they're only 40mm long to start with, so there's only going to be about 25mm or an inch into the actual end of the leg, which isn't very much. So I'm going to make them bite a lot stronger by letting in an oak dowel. So it's an end grain dowel. This is some that I made, and it's actually it should be 10mm, and it's very slightly undersized. So I've got a 9.5mm drill bit. And that's let into the surface of the leg like that, so that when I'm screwing down into the top of the leg, I'm actually screwing into the face grain of this oak, and that will make it a lot stronger. So I've done this one. Let's get that out of the way. And I've got my second one set up here. It's clamped to the bench. It's supported on my sliding dead man down underneath. And this is so much easier on this bench. I've not had the bench long. If you've not seen the build, then it's on YouTube. It's just brilliant. I should have done this years ago. It's fantastic. Right, okay. So I've marked out where they're going to go. The flag tells me where to stop so I don't drill into my bench. And some glue. Now if you can, get the grain lined up so that you're drilling across the growth rings like that. I think that must be it. And then, with a flush trim saw, just cut it off. There we are, perfect. So that's going to make a much stronger screw joint. There is one other small design change that I'm making to this chair. The original called for the front seat slat to sit flush with the front rail. Well, that gives me a very harsh 90-degree corner here, and also I think it looks a bit harsh as well as potentially feels a bit harsh. So I'm not doing that. Instead, I'm making the front rail a little bit wider. I've actually glued a piece on, 20mm or so, because I didn't realise that I wanted to do this until I actually saw what it looked like in the flesh with that in place. And this has got a nice round over. That's got about ½ inch radius there. So that's going to go in there. So it sits a little bit proud on the front now, and I think that looks better, as well as giving me a more comfortable front edge. So that goes on there like that. I haven't got room to get my pilot drill in, unfortunately, so we're going to have to just use brute force and ignorance. But a long screwdriver certainly helps. There we go. And I think that's going to look much nicer. it's time to put most of the seat slats on. I'm going to leave the very back one off for now because I need to have access to screw into the rear support when I attach the backs. But all the rest could go on, and it's easier to screw without the arm being in the way for my screwdriver. I've worked out through doing the first one that the distance between each slat is going to be 10.5 millimeters. So I found a piece of scrap out of the box, wrapped a few turns of tape around the ends to make them 10.46 actually. But that'll do nicely. So if I put that in there like that, I can then put that up against it, and that will be spaced correctly. And I go around the other side, do the rest. So you're going to see my back for a minute. And then I just keep going. And the last one. Good. So when that goes in there like that, that will look rather splendid, I think. Excellent. I think the arm assembly is probably the hardest thing to get right, or at least the easiest thing to get wrong, because there's very little in the way of absolute datum positions. So it's not so bad at the front, I can get them pretty evenly on the front legs, but at the back there's nothing to stop me being a bit like that or a bit like that. There's no reference point at the back at all. So how do we go about getting this absolutely straight? Well, the first thing to do is to make sure that I've got two identical pilot holes at the front here, because that's really the only datum position I've got. So this is going to go into there, and this is going to go into there. Now this distance is 20 inches, 20 and a half inches, and this is only 20. So I can't put a square in there, I can't use my square of Thales. So I've got to work out how to get that position correct. And I'm going to do so by measuring between that front screw hole, which I know is in the mirror image of that, and the back here, and that's screw hole and the back here. So at the moment, this is 32 and 13/16. And this is 33 and 5/16. No, 7/16. So that needs to go. Oh, I can work in millimetres better. It's easier. 850-ish. 840-ish. Right. So that's got to go this way very slightly. With that, very happy with that. So now it's time to put in another 2 screws at the back and at the front. Now the front one will need piloting, I think. I don't want to split the end grain. There we go. We're on the home straight now. I've just got the back splats to fit. Now, as you can see, mine is slightly different to Norm's. I've got a continuous curve across the top. It was meant to be circular, but it looks as if it's come out a bit parabolic, to be honest. And I do know why that is. I'll talk about that in a bit. But at least it's a smooth curve that runs over. I don't really like it when they go in steps. And also, I've made mine tapered. And in fact, I think this would take an even greater taper, to be honest. I've tapered them so they are 85 millimetres at the top, down to 58 millimetres at the bottom. I've also counterbored the bottom for 2 screws. Now then, This has presented me with a little bit of a problem. Not an unfixable problem, but these two outer ones in particular are at a significant tilt outwards. And that means that these two screws are at an angle like that. And they're going into a board which is horizontal. So this lower one in particular is very close to the under surface of that back support. And that means that there's a risk of it poking out the bottom. Now, as it happens, I can run my fingers over there and there's no hint of the point of the screw. So I've dodged a bullet there, but it is something to be aware of, that is a risk. It would have been better, and in fact on my next ones this is what I'm going to do, and there is going to be a next one. I'll tell you about that in a minute. I'm going to put a single screw hole in the bottom and then it can just pivot, and then there's no risk of the screw coming out because I can ensure that it's well up in the surface of that board. So I've got my centre slat set up to be central. So the first thing to do is to get a screw in that bottom. Right, okay. And now the next one needs to be eyeballed. So, get my other drill. Oh, don't lean on this yet, it's not fixed. There we go. I've sharpened my drill this morning, it does not make a difference. Now then, I am going to arrange these so that, where is it? Here we are. That's not it, Steve. That's not the right one, this is the right one. I'm going to arrange it so that there's a 20mm gap at the bottom here. And the easiest way to do that is with a 20mm spacer. And I need an intermediate slap, such as that one. So that goes like that. And I'm fixing the screw nearest to the, furthest away rather, from the centre, this one here. That's so that I run less risk of it poking out the bottom. So this is going to go up against the arm, and this is going to be halfway between the two. So I need to turn this round a bit actually so I can see what I'm doing. Otherwise you're going to have a view of my back for a few minutes. There we go. Bit higher up, Steve. And then this one goes halfway between the two. Now you can either just eyeball it or you can check with a ruler, but I think it should be about 35mm. This one about 34. So that's the layout for my splats, and I've just got to do the other side, and I'll see you in a minute. So all my splats are now in the right place. Now I've had to use my board stretcher on this one. I originally cut it to be the right size for Norm's original plans, but because I'm altering the shape of this, it was just a little bit too short for me. So I've used my board stretcher, and now it's the right length. My board stretcher usually lives over there. If you haven't got a board stretcher, then keep your eye open for them, because if you see one at a boot sale, I don't care how much they're asking for it, bite their hands off, because they're incredibly useful pieces of kit. I use mine all the time. So now it's time to cut the curve over here. And there are two ways of doing this. The way I've done it on this, which is to do to use a springy rule, or you can use some sort of kind of compass. So for a springy rule, you need, if you're working alone, 2 blocks of wood, and these are clamped at the same height on each side. It's actually 26 inches from the bottom of the splat. And then when I put a rule up against it, against them like that, I can get it to my top mark, which is there, and that gives me a nice smooth arc. And that's what I've done over here. But I've discovered since doing it that this looks a little bit pointed actually. And I think it's because at the sides this sort of tends to straighten out. So this is more of a parabolic shape rather than a circular shape. So there is another way of doing it. And that is to use a lat like this. And a pencil in there. Gives me an arc like that. And as you can see, the two aren't quite the same. This would be a bit short for doing that one, but for the springy steel bit, it's fine. And you can see that these two curves are not the same. So you pays your money and you takes your choice, really. There's no right and wrong, it's personal preference. Right, so now it's a case of taking all these off, bandsaw, router table, sander, and then put them all back on again. And the last one. There we go. Now I've got a few dozen holes to plug. I've got some plugs, tap them in, here we are, which I just made on my drill press. Glue, tap them in, align the grain, trim them off when they're dry. And it's quite important to plug these bottom ones before this last seat slat goes in like that, otherwise you can't get at them. So there we are. Now then, what are they like to sit in? That's the question. No, mustn't sit on my battery pack. There we go. That really is pretty good. It's quite low and it's quite laid back. Not as laid back as I feared, actually. When I first started assembling, I thought, oh dear, they're going to be as laid back as my old ones. And they are quite low and quite deep in the seat. You go in quite a long way. But once you're in, they're great. Now let's see what happens if we alter a few dimensions. Yes, they're quite deep, aren't they? Let's alter a few dimensions. 3 pieces at the back. And that's going to raise the back by 60 millimeters. And I'm going to raise the front by 20 millimeters. And now let's try it. Now, okay, the arms are no longer level, and I can feel that actually, but I think that's better. I do think that's better. It's still plenty laid back enough, but because the whole thing's tilted, it does feel much better. So, I've already got a client who wants these, even before they were finished. My friend Charlie came round yesterday and he said, oh, I'll have 2. So, and he's taller than I am, he's a lot longer in the leg. And he's happy with the depth of these. So, the deal is, he buys me some more wood, and I make myself another pair, and I'm going to incorporate these changes. I'm going to make it a wee bit higher, and a wee bit less laid back, and then we'll both be happy. Well, I've made another pair of chairs, and I've incorporated some of those design changes that I talked about. The one I've not incorporated is the height of the front of the seat. I've kept that the same. I know I blocked it up, but I've not done that. So it's a little bit narrower, 3/4 of an inch or so, different curve at the top, bit of a curve under here. But the biggest design change is altering the shape of this side come back leg. Now, this was Norm's template, and it's cut from a 6-inch board. And this is my template, cut from an 8-inch board. And you can see that that gives me this flat to which the rear support is screwed. That brings that up by a couple of inches. It also makes the leg look very heavy. So I've cut away the underside to give me a bit of an arc there, a bit of an arch. And I think that makes it look more elegant. But it's not so much what it looks like that matters. It's what does it feel like? What does it sit like? And there's only one way to find out, and that's to put them head to head. Or, if you prefer, bottom to bottom. These are the two chairs side by side, Norm's and mine. You can see that this top pattern isn't exactly the same as Norm's, but I did this with a sprung ruler, and it's come out sort of parabolic, really. This one I've done with a trammel bar, and it's come out circular. And if I'm honest, I prefer this. The arms are the same height and the same shape. The fronts are the same height. Not quite the same shape. I've got a cutout underneath here, and I think that's an improvement, I think, aesthetically. And we can see how much difference there is if we turn them profile. And now you can see just how much difference raising that lower support by altering the profile of the leg has made. If I sit in this one, it's very laid back and great for sitting in the sun. Very nice. But to get out, I really have got to get to the front before I can get up. And I know I'm not the only person who has that difficulty. In contrast, this one is still very relaxed. Very nice, actually. And certainly better for, say, having a plate on your lap for an alfresco lunch. And it's much easier to get out of. So, which you prefer, really, is up to you. There's no right and wrong in this, it's just a matter of preference. I'm glad I've made these changes. If I were to make a third pair, not this year, I'm Adirondacked out for one season, but if I were to make another one, I'd probably make it halfway between the two, to tell you the truth. Certainly not as deep as this, but maybe a little bit deeper than that. I hope that you've enjoyed watching as much as I've enjoyed building these chairs. So until the next time, and the next project, thanks for watching, and enjoy your workshop. Cheerio!